all the PowerPoint rules because there's a lot of type, but it's really just the public notes. If I had notes, I would have distributed them to you. And do that. Got a glare with this light behind me. Um, so in essence, the key is for you to be able to follow along literally. Otherwise, I would be like reading from a text. I'm trying to adjust for this light. I might not be able to beat it. Okay. There's a light coming right down my forehead. It's like splitting my face in half. I don't know. I'm gonna try one thing. If it doesn't work, it's just not gonna work. So, Khalid, do I have to have this light on for your camera? Yeah, it's more distracting to have that light behind me that way. I'm a little darker on the video than I prefer because I don't have a light in front of me. But it's okay. This is better. This is better. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So if you wanna go on over to Facebook Live, most of you have phones and what have you, and they can operate, or tablets. They can operate without having to tie into this system here. Because I think if everybody here tied into it, would probably what do you say, overwhelm the system. So in order for you to see the notes that I'll be reading from, then I recommend that you go to either Fahim Shuaib Facebook Live or Fahim Shuaib YouTube Live. Beyond that, you can listen and get the info, inshallah. All right, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. What my adjust here? So I've entitled this Unveiling the Hidden, the 1,000-year-old Muslim theological debate modern Muslims need to know about. And to begin, Bismillah, I'd like to read about 3 hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to begin this, because it's the gist of it. Because what am I addressing ultimately, even with the title and in all that I said? Tonight, the focus is the spiritual vulnerability of new and sincere Muslims. The spiritual vulnerability of new and sincere Muslims. Juwayriyah radiallahu anh reported that Allah's Messenger came out from her apartment in the morning as she was busy in observing her dawn prayer in her place of worship. He came back in the forenoon and she was still sitting there. He, the Prophet, said to her, "You have been in the same seat since I left you?" She said, "Yes." Thereupon Allah's apostle said, "I recited 4 words 3 times after I left you, and if these were to be weighed against what you have recited since the morning, these would outweigh them. Excuse me. And these words are, hallowed be Allah, praise be to Allah, and that is, it would be Subhanallah. Hallowed be Allah, and praise are due to Him according to the number of His creation, and according to the pleasure of His self, and according to the weight of His throne, and according to the ink used in recording His words for His praise. So he's saying, I made those statements 3 times, and you've been here all morning, and what I said outweighed what you've been doing. Another report, Prophet sallallahu alaihi, these are, obviously this is during the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is when al-Islam is new among the Muslim believers of his time. So I'm pointing to them as new and sincere, but vulnerable spiritually. The Prophet, he performed ablution one day, and his companion began to wipe themselves with the water that he had used. The Prophet asked them, what induced you to do that? And when they replied that it was love for Allah and His Messenger, he said, if anyone is pleased to love Allah and His Messenger, or rather to have Allah and His Messenger love him, he should speak the truth when he tells anything, fulfill his trust when he's put in a position of trust, and be a good neighbor. They're taking the wudu water of the Prophet and wiping themselves with the wudu water of the Prophet. And he said, obviously they're sincere. He said, but if that's what you're really trying to achieve, then speak the truth, fulfill your trust, and be a good neighbor. Practical, actual, simple things that achieve this love and nearness to Allah, not some exaggerated ritual. Anas radiallahu anhu reported that 3 men came to the house of the wives of the Prophet to inquire about his worship. What was his? How does he worship? And when they were informed, they considered their own worship to be insignificant and said, who are we in comparison to the Prophet when Allah has forgiven his past and future sins? One of them said, as for me, I shall offer prayer all night long. Another said, I shall observe fasting perpetually and never break it. Another said, I will abstain from women and will never marry. The Prophet then came to them and said, are you the people who said such things? I swear by Allah, the Prophet speaking now, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that I fear Allah more than you do, and I am most obedient and dutiful among you, more obedient and dutiful among you to him, but still I observe fast sometimes and break it at others. I perform optional prayers at night sometimes and sleep at night at others. I also marry. So whoever turns away from my sunnah is not from me. So the Prophet is telling them, in essence, don't go to extremes. So it's a natural state when you're new to where's Bilal? Dr. Bilal, you in here, right? Oh, there he is. Dr. Bilal, did you sponsor me in the Amway, or was it your brother? Who sponsored me in the Amway? That was you.
I didn't sponsor you, but we came in about the same time.
Came in about, yeah. I mean, I was juiced about some Amway, man. I mean, it's like, this is going to put me over. It's going to be forever. We good, you know. But there'll be a garage full of stuff. I mean, I believed in network marketing. I believed in the product. La la la. I was just over exhilarated. You know you can get jacked up, right? Shoot, I used to drive down to Pacifica. Do you know where Pacifica is? I loved the ride, and there was also some beautiful cookies that I liked in some little bakery that was there. At least I'll get some cookies, right? So, what I'm saying is that when you're new and excited about something, you're wide open for your own, how can you say, extremes, and also targets for others who see your enthusiasm, excitement, and want to exploit it. So the prophet, these are just examples of him saying, watch out, don't do this, do it this way. This is what you want, then do that. That what you want, then do this. And Allah will love you, and Allah and His Messenger will love you, inshallah. All right. So the basic question that we're addressing tonight is, what's best for new Muslims in modern times? I'm proposing that the answer is a methodology and an approach to al-Islam that provides a valid, authentic perspective in al-Islam that is independent of the misunderstandings that accompany the canonized orthodoxies whose origins most new Muslims don't understand, particularly as regards living al-Islam with the proper balance between rationality and spirituality. Sometimes, if you never ask yourself that question, if that has never been a question for you, then there may be a part of you that feels like, I'm good. It's a settled question, etc. But that's also a part of, I'm saying this in the kind, and everything I say, I'm saying it in the spirit of kindness, shared goodness, education, and all of that. I'm not trying to diminish anybody or indict or what have you. But that falls into the category of ignorance is bliss. It's like, it doesn't bother you if you don't know that it's something to be concerned about. But when you get into a situation where one overwhelms the other, perhaps that can be a significant emotional event that'll wake you up to, oh man, I need to work that out because I kind of went too far on this as opposed to the other. So this the balance between rationality and spirituality is a very, very critical thing, especially for new Muslims, and especially in modern times. It's critical. And I should say, added to that, especially in America, too. Let's look at some statistics that I want to bring to your attention in this issue. According to the 2015 study of Pew Research Center, Jews make up only 0.2% of the world's population. Using this figure, we can calculate that Jews have won approximately 208 Nobel Prizes out of the global population of around 15 million. That is, the population at this time, 2015, 15 million Jews. 208 Nobel Prizes of that global population. That means that there's one Nobel Prize per 72,115 Jews, just rounded off, 72,000. So for every 72,000 Jews, there's one Nobel Prize. For Christians, it's much more difficult to estimate per capita number of Nobel Prizes, as there are many different denominations of Christianity and population sizes of each can vary widely. However, as of 2021, Christians make up about 31% of the world's population, or around 2.4 billion people, Christian population. Now, using the figure of 900 Christian Nobel Prize winners, this gives a per capita rate of approximately one Nobel Prize per 2.7 million Christians. Jews, one per 72,000. Christians, one per 2.7 million. Excuse me. And for Muslims, the population is also difficult to estimate, as there are many countries with significant Muslim populations, but no central authority that keeps track of the total number of Muslims worldwide. However, as of 2021, Muslims are estimated to make up around 24% of the world's population, or approximately, and I heard a stat over the weekend, I mentioned it while it's passing through my mind, that Muslims and Christians, according to Pew Research that this person was reading from, that we will be in 2050 equal, right about something on the order of 3.8 or 3.9, supposedly, billion Muslims and Christians. But back to this note, says that 24% of the world's population, or approximately 1.9 billion people, using the figure of 12 Muslim Nobel Prize winners, that's 12, a dozen Muslim Nobel Prize winners, this gives a per capita rate of approximately one Nobel Prize per 158 Muslims. Jews, one per 72,000. Christians, 1.27 million. Muslims, one per 158 million Muslims. Do you understand that it's like half of the population of the United States? It's like you got to go through that among the Muslims before you find one Nobel Prize. So this means, just by calculation, Jews 38x per capita than Christians. That is 38 times more Nobel Prizes among the Jews and the Christians. And Jews relative to Muslims, 2,194 times the Muslims. Question: are the Jews that much more competent in all categories than Christians and Muslims? Christians are almost 60 times that achievements compared to Muslims. 60 times. Are the Christians that much more competent in all categories than Muslims? Then the Muslims, one Nobel Prize per 158 million people. Are the Muslims proportionally less competent in all categories than Christians and Jews? There's a lot of touches and takes that you can take on that. But this is just a heuristic to consider. We should want to answer the question in some way. Well, why the vast difference? And this is only what I'll continue to say is only a part of that answer. So what happened? There's a book called The Lever of Riches. The author is Joel Marker. I'm sorry, I think I'm going to some. We got one cough drop left. Let's see what's happening. So this is from pages 56 and 57 of The Lever of Riches by Joel. I'm saying Mokyr, Mokyr. Says now what this book is about: the technological and creative and economic progress throughout history. It starts from like before the wheel all the way up to what makes wealth in modern times as of the time of this publication. Assessing the technological achievements of the Islamic world is difficult. Not all Muslims are Arabs, and the so-called Islamic world contained at different times large numbers of Christians and Jews. Large variances also appear to have existed within the Islamic world, with Persia and Spain at the geographical peripheries of that world, meaning the central world of Islam was here, and then you got Persia and Spain out there. And then, speaking of the Islamic world, he said, appearing on the whole, let's talk about the Islamic world. It was appearing on the whole to have been more creative than Mesopotamia and Egypt. Although, the author admits, although the information is lacking to make such judgments with certainty. Meaning that he said, I don't have much fear of contradiction, but I can establish it with certainty. But there's a lot of what we're seeing that implies or suggests that the Islamic world appears on the whole to have been more creative than Mesopotamia and Egypt. That's a big statement. Then it goes on. Until recently, the verdict of technological historians on medieval Islam, that is in the Islam, quote unquote, in the Middle Ages, quote unquote, or in the middle of its life. Islam was harsh, meaning that they were saying, man, that Islam, well, it ain't about nothing. They said, but until recently, the verdict was that way. But this author that he's citing here contends that it is difficult to discover anything that could be called an enrichment of acquired knowledge. So saying something is happening in the Muslim world that's hard to define. There's not a word for it. This is what he's saying. He's saying it's difficult to discover anything that could be called an enrichment of acquired knowledge. This is what he's saying. He's saying that the way Islam, we always say, Al-Islam, the way Al-Islam addressed knowledge, it would acquire it and enrich it. He said, but there's no word for that. There's no word for that. But that's what they did. That's what Muslims do in this research that they're speaking of. He said, it's difficult to discover anything that could be called an enrichment of acquired knowledge, yet technological creativity as an economic phenomenon does not require the creation of totally new knowledge. Okay. To say someone is technologically creative doesn't require that they produce something new. That's what he's saying. You don't have to create something to be technologically creative. That's what they found among the Muslims. And I have a note that I'll mention in a second to underscore that from another. So they say, essentially parenthetically, innovation does not require invention. You can be innovative without inventing something. That's why he said the point about what do you call the enrichment of acquired knowledge, because that's what Muslims are doing. They are technologically creative, and therefore they are innovative, even though in so many instances they are not inventing anything new. And that's just a critical point. We keep going. So he says, Borrowing, extending, adapting will increase the supply of goods and services just as well. So you borrow something from someone's, bevy of knowledge, right? You can extend that knowledge, you can adapt it to the situation, and it still have its productive result, right? That's technological creativity. The problem is that without original ideas, and I'll say this since I know this is the track that we're on, there are many, there are prominent scholars who I deeply respect and who I count as my friends. But they say, without shame, embarrassment, etc., in fact, saying that it's appropriate for them to be this way, is that I don't have original ideas. I don't have original ideas. It's a point of righteous pride. I'm not talking arrogance. These are people, righteous and humble people, but they don't have a quest for original ideas. But now, when it comes from a civilizational point of view, the problem is that without original ideas, borrowing and adapting, this technological creativity that we talked about, borrowing and adapting will run into diminishing returns. You can only borrow so much. You can only adapt so much. You can only extend so much. Sooner or later, you're going to come up against a problem that you're going to have to invent and create some new solution for that problem. If you don't, you're done. At this level of technological creativity for the Islamic civilization, and the author says, for some reason, I don't know if anybody's looking at it online in the room here, but that I have that red, yellow, highlight, bold, because that's where an answer is required. For some reason, ran into difficulties. Islamic society was not capable, and I put my own note inside of this quote here. I said, no, it's not that they were not capable. They lost the capacity. Something happened to cause them to stop being innovative. So it wasn't they weren't capable. They stopped for some reason. So, continue to quote without my input. Islamic society was not capable of adding much new to the existing stock of ideas. Remember, original ideas. So at this point, they were not adding much new to the existing stock of ideas. It retrieved and applied so brilliantly, meaning it had been doing it all the time. Then it stopped for some reason. Consequently, Islamic technology ran out of steam. At some time, make a note of this chronology. At some time around the 12th century, Islam lost its momentum and technological supremacy. The Muslims were on top of the technological mountain, if you will. So Islam lost its momentum and technological supremacy eventually passed to their Christian enemies north of the Pyrenees. Who were, so now here's your competition, right? They were equally capable of borrowing technology from others and turned out to be better at creating their own. So you go down once, you go down on one level, you were ahead before, but they could do that, but you could do this one thing they couldn't do. Okay, then you stop doing that one thing that they were good at, and you also lost steam in terms of technological creativity, and so therefore the Christian enemies over, according to his writing, north over of the Pyrenees, they took your spot. They turned out to be better at creating their own. So they were innovators as well as imitators. Okay. The West initially far behind, first it was way behind, was equally willing to learn from other cultures, which is what human beings do. So we do that. But the West never lost its capacity to improve upon and refine other ideas, applying to them in new combinations, adapting them to novel usages. And those are key things. You have to be able to adapt, acquire, apply new combinations, novel situations, and continue to extend your life upon that development. He goes on, and eventually surpassing, that is the West, eventually surpassing the original ideas to the point where the original inventing society had to borrow its own ideas back, often unrecognizably altered and improved. Concluding these quotes, having pioneered power and chemical technologies by the 13th century, Islamic society began to show signs of backwardness. Not only was it not going forward anymore, not only had it stagnated, it was going backwards. 13th century. Now, there's a note here, and I'll just mention for those who are not seeing it, that there's the Gifford Lectures by Professor Mark Pagel. There are 3 parts. They're extremely interesting. This one, the evolution of creativity. This evolution of creativity is talking about innovation and imitation. So he basically starts his lectures that, have you ever done anything that changed the game of whatever it is that you're doing? Whatever. Have you ever done anything on your job where you brought about an innovation, you brought about a new idea, and the whole system changed because you did that? Right? Were you ever a part of anything where because you did what you did, the game is not the same anymore? Like Abdul Kareem Jabbar and the dunk or something like that. I don't know if Steph, the 3-point line was already present when Steph started doing what he was doing, but he did change the game in that sense, and so many other things. The Steve Jobs and the Microsoft and all the rest of that. These are innovators. Jeff Bezos, innovators. And no doubt you know of others. But the point is that what in all of his lecture, he points out, listen, the nature of society and civilization and advancement, it is 5% innovation and 95% imitation. 5% innovation, 95% imitation. And he goes a long way to make it clear that that's the nature of God. God basically, and that's nature. He's saying it's a rule. History has shown that that's how it goes. Because once somebody innovates something, the other human beings imitate it. What do I need to innovate for? It's already got it. So it's like, let's do what he do, right? Until it gets to the point where, okay, we need something new. Well, God blesses someone somewhere to innovate that next new thing, and they get rewarded for it. That's what we're seeing. They come up with the game changer. They come up with the what they call it nowadays. What that's probably old language now. Disruptors. Yeah, disruptors. Right. Um, so the point is, Muslims were in charge of that for centuries. Muslims were the innovators. Muslims were the technologically creative people. That's why the societies were coming to where the Muslims were and learning Arabic and learning, etc., from the Muslims. And the Muslims were taking knowledge from the Mediterranean and cleaning it up, if you will. And also, we'll have more to say about that, inshallah. Also, being in certain ways undermined by the way they engaged it. But we'll see, inshallah, that sometimes the cure can turn out to be worse than the disease, but that's another part of it. All right, so the point is that the Muslim lost that edge around the 12th, 13th century, but it started a couple of centuries before that. We'll talk about it. So you should be hearing, oh, okay, that's a part of what's explaining why is only one Nobel Prize for 158 million, whatever it was that stopped that lead on being innovative and technologically advanced and creative and scientific, etc. Whatever stopped that, that is what has led to this particular consequence. And that's what we're going to talk about, continuing. So they said Islamic technology eventually ran out of steam. At some time around the 12th century, Islam lost its momentum and technological supremacy eventually passed to their Christian enemies north of the Pyrenees. Having pioneered power and chemical technologies, by the 13th century, Islamic society began to show signs of backwardness. Question, why and how did that happen? Consider and compare both histories. Christian doctrinal debates of the 5th century AD. So that's around in the 400s, if you will. Most of you, I think, are familiar with the Third Council of Nicaea, 325 CE. So that's early 4th century, right? But those debates continued. In any case, so about at the 400s. And for the Muslims, so you have this intra-faith debates, Christian to Christian, and intra-faith debates, Muslim to Muslim, polemics, right? Debates around, again, on the Muslim calendar, about the same chronologies, like 5th century Hijra and 5th century AD. It was a point of interest. It is very important for Muslims today to see that many of the mistaken responses that we have given to the charges and the challenges of our faith in the changing modern world are in many ways the same as those of the errant predecessors in other faiths. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said that the Muslims are going to fall into the same lizard holes that the Jews and the Christians fell into. It's like it's a part of the pattern. It's predictable. For example, the truth is that the Bible, which Christians read today, is an anti-heretical document, meaning it was put together, let's call it as a manifesto against all other claims to orthodoxy in Christianity as it was at that time. Said, no, you're not the real Christians. We're the real Christians. No, that's not a real scripture. This is the real scripture. So when they canonized, when they decided this is the Bible, then everything else was, as they call, anathematized. Everything else is apocryphal. Everything else is not true Christianity. This book is true Christianity. And so that book, the Bible, which is read today, is an anti-heretical heresy. It's against heresy, as described by the authorities of the time. An anti-heretical document compiled in order to combat what the 4th century theological leadership considered unorthodox. That's their job. They're the gatekeepers. And every religion has it. The view of Christianity, which was ultimately endorsed, was the one which best met the political needs of the temporal leader of the time. Nevertheless, that Bible and that doctrine are received today as though they were the very revealed Word of God. So it is today with Muslims, with some Muslims, and their ideas about Islam and un-Islam and Sunnah and not Sunnah. So much so that to try to convince some Muslims of the human origins of their opinions about what is orthodox for Islam today is very much like trying to convince the average Christian that the Bible is not the veritable Word of God. So let's go into it. From Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Suleiman, from his work Toward an Islamic Theory of International Relations. So he talks about what I've titled, this is my title here, when Muslims fell into the technology gap. The ulama, I'm quoting him now, the ulama, the Muslim theologians and learned men for centuries deeply involved in taqlid and arid legalism. Taqlid means blind following, and arid legalism is just dry legalism, legalistic, thereby providing little leadership. Their education lacked the concept of systematic empirical observation. Because what you're going to find as we go on, you'll find I'm going to call it the fountainhead of these antagonistic views that led to the decline of all that we talked about with regard to technological creativity. It had to do with the stepping away from the sciences and knowledge and thinking and reasoning that could keep the Muslims, quote unquote, competitive, as they had competitors, competitive by virtue of learning how to imitate where appropriate and innovate where necessary with regard to the concepts of systematic empirical observation. So material science and various sciences were coming up and evolving, because we're beginning to talk now about the early Renaissance, the early period, it's sort of like at the decline of the Muslim golden era and the beginning of the rise of the European Renaissance. And so as the rising tide of again, the European imitating and getting their hands on this technological creativity and doing what they do with their capacity to adapt and extend and they were doing it. So it's like the Muslims were declining and they were coming up. And so now the European quote unquote technological success and the like was pushing into the Muslim domain, and the leadership of the Muslim theologians, according to this scholar, they were not ready for the shadow that was being cast into the Muslim world, because there, for some reason, been an abandonment of thinking and reasoning. And it left them, talking of the leadership, left them alienated from those specializing, meaning, okay, y'all stay over there, from those specializing in the newly evolving social sciences with their emphasis. So this is what the new sciences were doing. What were they doing? They were putting emphasis on application and methods. That's thinking and reasoning. And the leadership of the time among the Muslims were unaware of the repercussions of the new knowledge and methods. They didn't know what is it going to do. And they weren't as in touch with or on the cutting edge of emerging technology. This is way back. So they were unaware of the repercussions of the new knowledge and methods on the composition, the interaction, and organization of society. They didn't understand how this is going to reshape and modify their society. Added to that, nor were they able to envision the potential of this new knowledge harnessed to the values, goals, and overall paradigm of Islam. They couldn't adapt. This is the Muslim leadership. They couldn't adapt to the rising technological, information, scientific tide coming from the West. So there was no leadership for the Muslims in that regard. There was no arc for the Muslims to get into effectively. Now, let's get past this title first. It's an article from the New Atlantis, and it says why the Arabic world turned away from science. Now, this author is very aware that, and it mentions in the article that all Muslims are not Arabs. So this article was particularly focused on the Arabic world. Why the Arab world? Why did it turn away from science? Because when you come over to Al-Andalus, when you come over to Spain, when you come over to North Africa and over to West Africa, the Arabs weren't the leaders. They had a role, but they were not the leaders. The Moors, when you talk about the Moors, I know all y'all know about that. And Dr. Ali Mazrui, rahimahullah alayh, in his piece, The Africans, he pointed out the reason that al-Islam in quote-unquote Africa as we properly know it geographically, how Islam spread faster in West Africa than it did in East Africa, even though East Africa is closest to the birthplace of quote-unquote al-Islam, Mecca, of course. His explanation was that Africans were better at teaching Africans than Arabs were at teaching Africans. And on the eastern portion of Africa, there was an arrogance from the Arabs toward the Africans, having that division indicates that they wanted to impose their way of seeing, their way of being, their way of knowing on the Africans. And Africans said, man, I ain't feeling that, man. So when al-Islam extended into Africa, not only did it spread faster, it actually, al-Islam, unlike other places, al-Islam started at the top among the Africans. Meaning the kings and the rulers and the quote-unquote, let's call them the aristocracy for the sake of conversation, they accepted it and then they passed it down to the masses, where usually it bubbles up. It came from the top. Why? Because they had sense. Saying, this is better. Okay, so and the authors point out you could not spread Islam by the sword in Africa. It's like the Ethiopians were already used to whooping Arabs. In fact, when the Prophet, you all know this, I got to move on. When the first hijrah that was made to Abyssinia / Ethiopia, Habashi, what have you. So it's like, why? Because we set up. The Africans, we good. You right here next door. I've never read any hadith where they got on a boat to go to Abyssinia. It was okay, and everybody got on board the boat, and we didn't have anything to drink because it was only salt water. Ain't no hadith like that. Why? Because it's one landmass. But the Africa that they give us is the Africa that cuts off Arabia from that Africa. We don't want y'all to identify with that. Robbery. Just think about it. And then you got Bilalians. Yeah, them old Arabs. That then the game is winning, right? It's like, hey, you just as much that, and they're just as much this as you. So, any case, so this article does speak to the Arabic world, particularly, and what turned it away from science, and whatever, call it spoiler alert or whatever. That is what many new Muslims in modern times, and especially in America, are suffering from. My opinion, and I have a 50-year overview of Al-Islam in America, so I'm not new to the view that too many Arabs have found a feeding ground among new Muslims, and especially new African American Bilalian Muslims. Like it or not, that's the fact. But what they're serving up, which is where we're going, what they're serving up is not the best meal for advancement, because you've already seen, just in basic what I've said, is that whatever it is that you're eating, whatever it is you're serving, whatever it is you're following, you ain't catching up with the leading powers and forces in the world. So how is that? Why is that the case? Inshallah, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So from this article, it says, just as there's no simple explanation for the success of Arabic science. So when he's saying Arabic science, he is talking about Arabs. The success of Arabic science, there's no simple explanation for its gradual, not sudden, as Al-Afghani claims. So he's arguing against somebody else that's saying it was a sudden collapse. No, it was a gradual collapse, a gradual demise. He goes on, he says, the most significant factor was physical and geopolitical. And here comes your 1,000-year mark right here. The most significant factor was physical and geopolitical as early as the 10th or 11th century. So it's like this didn't just happen. It was going on. It started as early as the 10th century. We're in the 21st century. Started in the 10th century and the 11th century. That's your 1,000 years. So what I'm talking about, we are at the outer end of something that started 1,000 years ago. The Abbasid Empire began to factionalize and fragment due to increased provincial autonomy and frequent uprisings. The Abbasid Empire collapsing, right? By 1258, the little that was left of the Abbasid state was swept away by the Mongol invasion. And in Spain, Christians conquered Cordoba in 1236 and Seville in 1248, after Muslims had been operating there for nearly 500 years. But The Islamic turn away from scholarship actually preceded the civilization's geopolitical decline. It can, and let me mention this Quran. Allah says, and He never changed the grace He bestows upon a people until they change it themselves with what is in their own soul. So if you're up and it starts coming down, it has something to do with a change inside of yourself. If you're down and start going up, it also has to do with a change that took place and must take place inside yourself. So the turn away from scholarship preceded the civilization's geopolitical decline, and it can be traced back to, and here are the two key players that we're going to mention now. It can be traced back to the rise of the anti-philosophical Ash'ariism. Ash'ari, like that, and then Ash'ariism school among, this author says, Sunni Muslims, right? That whole Sunni Shiite thing, that's used just to distinguish, okay, Sunni Muslims and Shiite Muslims, right? So when they use Sunni Muslims here, they're saying these are two Sunni, the second one is coming, two Sunni Muslim sects, but with two different perspectives about how to address knowledge and Islam for that matter. So it says anti-philosophical. So they're anti-philosophical and they're an anti-rationalist movement. So here you go, anti-philosophy, anti-rationality. And we once again turn our gaze back to the time of the Abbasid Caliph El-Mamun. El-Mamun picked up the pro-science torch. So there's a movement in Islam 1,000 years ago battling each other. One was anti-philosophical and anti-rational, and the other was pro-philosophical and pro-scientific. Okay? And El-Mamun picked up the pro-science torch that was lit by the second Caliph Al-Mansur and ran with it. He responded to the crisis of legitimacy by attempting to undermine traditionalists, meaning that he was at war with other Muslims who represented the traditionalist religious scholarship, while actively sponsoring a doctrine called Mu'tazilism. Mu'tazilism. Right? We're going to say more about it in a minute. But just get this in your mind. Ash'ari and Mu'tazili. The Mu'tazili and Ash'ari. Those are the two factions. One is rationalist and one is anti-rationalist, to put it simply. So, while actively sponsoring a doctrine called Mu'tazilism that was deeply influenced by Greek rationalism, particularly Aristotelianism. To this end, he imposed an inquisition. You heard about the inquisition among the Christians when anybody that was speaking against that biblical point of view, etc., they were punished severely, right? So to this end, he imposed an inquisition under which those who refused to profess their allegiance to Mu'tazilism were punished by flogging, imprisonment, or beheading. This is the one who's going against the traditionalists, and he's doing all this to force people to submit, quote unquote, to his way. But the caliphs who followed El-Mamun, who was doing all this, they upheld the doctrine with less fervor, and within a few decades, adherence to it became a punishable offense. So the tide was turned. So there's a battle. And then so one, while he was the caliph, he was putting the pressure on the one. But then after he died, those that were supposed to be his successors, no, we're not really going to go with that. In fact, y'all keep doing this and you're going to get punished. The backlash against Mu'tazilism was tremendously successful. By 885, a half century after his death, it even became a crime to copy books of philosophy. I hope you understand. So I'll say more. Yes. So that the Ash'ari, so now you have the Ash'ari, the Mu'tazili. Ash'ari, Mu'tazili. Ash'ari are those who are against the philosophy and the science, da da da. Mu'tazili, simply put, they are toward the more rational, scientific, philosophical side, and they are at war with each other. So the author says, for example, the Ash'ari view has endured to this day. Its most extreme form can be seen in some sects, sects, of Islamists. For example, Mohammed Yusuf, it went out. This is one need battery. Shahid, here, let me get this. You gotta change the batteries in there. Any questions? Need for clarification, comment, etc. While I wait to get the mic back. Or y'all just getting a good nap? Says go ahead. It's perfect sleeping music, right? Go ahead, B. Alaikum assalam.
Your title, talking about new Muslims.
Yes.
Right now, and I will try to be as brief as I can.
Okay.
There's a sister that just came into the religion that's a friend of my wife's, and she's an attorney. She's very analytical. And she just accepted the religion. She's taking her shahada. Lives in Florida, and she goes around, goes to the masjid. And the question she had is, why? My prayer is communicating with Allah. Then why am I speaking in a language that I don't understand? That's how green she is in terms of her knowledge of the religion.
That's a good question.
Yeah, and so my wife told her, this is a deen. You have a debt. And you need to understand that your debt is to, your prayer is a submission to Allah.
Thank you.
And even though she's learning Arabic.
Yeah.
But she's, I guess, feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
She's an accomplished, attorney.
Alhamdulillah.
So she used to having control of certain things.
Absolutely.
And so she's being confronted with this kind of situation, which is, I guess, relatively new to her, and she feels incompetent.
Yeah.
So
and she is in relevance relative to this.
Right. So I would like to know what you would say to this sister. I think Tina did a good job in what she said to her, but I'd like to.
Oh no, that's good.
Confronting that because we're talking about what's happening with new Muslims, right?
Yeah.
And it also applies to our children. Our children are kind of confronted with the same thing. They're living in a modern world that they're resistant to not keeping up with what the Joneses are doing, so to speak. Their young people around them are doing, and so.
Yeah. I mean, just ever so briefly, it's like the idea. The idea. Just let's start with the personal. One part of the personal aspect of it is, even if we go right brain, left brain, let's just put it like that, right? So the left brain, which is much more analytical, logical, et cetera, which is also where modern man is doing most of his thinking out of. It's also the place where the ego is built. That's where the ego is built, right? And so when I can't do what I would like to do with that part of my brain that I'm most used to using, I got a problem with that. Who is that? That's your ego talking to you. And one of the first things that you have to do, you're going to have to learn how to submit, right? That's I'm talking about from an anatomical, psychological, neurobiological position, right? When we make the adhan, hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, right? And this how can you say, this transverse relationship between the parts of our body, the right brain and the left side, the left brain and right side, that effect, that's Allah giving us an exercise to balance our brain out again, right? Hey, you people on the left, you need to come more to the right. You people on the right, you need to come more to the left, right? So that ego does that. Now, for as far as so it's an ego challenge, yes, and Allah humbles us. So if you stay submitted, then you're going to get a humility that humanizes you, because that's what happens when you get so excessively sensitive to your own success and achievement, etc., and you take ownership to that to such a degree that you identify yourself as that. That's not good. You are not that. That's something that you did, right? That Allah blessed you to do, if you can understand that. When you embrace that, then you thank Allah for that, etc., and you recognize the lesson to be gained, from having to make the change, putting a demand on you to make a better and a newer you in so many ways. But past that, the Quranic Arabic thing, that's just so massively huge. Look, Allah created the Arabic language. He had those that we call Arabs. He had them, I'm going to call it like a divine petri dish. Nobody came in to be bothered with or to bother. They were just messing with themselves, right? Everybody else said, "Who's that?" It's like Alexander the Great. When he got there, he saw the Arabs say, "There's no honor, no victory in conquering these people. These people have already conquered themselves. They're beasts in human form." And so he went on around there and headed on to China. Why? Because Allah wanted them to be unaffected by other languages. So he created that language. And even when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was sent there after birth, into that quarter where, mashallah, I haven't memorized her name. I don't know why. I know her name. Was her name Baraka? Was the prophet's nursemaid? What is it? Was her name Halima? Okay, somebody can look that up. But the point is that, okay, the wet nurse, she was with, she lived for a very long time. What wonderful story that I have to incorporate. In any case, the point is that they would send their children out to be in that space to actually learn the language in its original state. That was a part of the prophet being out there. So the point is that the Lughat al-Arabiya, the Arabic, is the glory of the Arab speaking people. I'm talking about the original Arabic in which the Quran was revealed, not the dialectical Arabic that the rest of the world broke us up into, which set us Tower of Babel against each other, Arabs now even. But the Lughat al-Arabiya, which is protected, which is the revealed language that Allah revealed for the purpose, and it didn't even have a grammar until the Quran came. They knew how to talk to each other because human beings are oral, but we became literate. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Allah brought the literacy with Quranic Arabic and the real value and function of words, just as a utility. The value and function of words is to be carriers and holders and containers of ideas, principles, values, knowledge, information. Words are like this cup. This is a word. This is the meaning in it, right? So Allah created the Arabic language, to the Quranic Arabic language, to be the container for His ideas. I always feel like you should jump to the roof when you understand that. It's not Einstein's ideas. It's not whoever you think is smart, Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk. No, this is the creator of the heavens and earth. He said this. And does Allah's words have a little bit in them, or does Allah's word have a lot in them? Every word is universal. Every letter is universal. So the point is, no, you can't just walk up and grab the words of God. English was a language that was created. It was even y'all already know about bastard language and all the rest of that. So it's like, I mean, the French and the original British English speakers and they kind of look down on American English. Like American English, you're Forrest Gump. You know what I'm saying? So it's like there's no comparison to English and the others, Latin and what have you, to what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has embodied in. That's why it's untranslatable. The Quran is untranslatable. So you have to, in order to hear what the Creator of the heavens and the earth said, you need to learn the language that He said it in. Or you're going to learn what Yusuf Ali and Muhammad Asad and Pickthall and what they said, what they got out of it. Okay, well, this is what I got out of it. Yeah, you know something? Yeah. Well, this don't look like it says full of that one over there. It's like, okay, we just got lost in translation. But it's good enough for you. And we're starting to say, got to get off the translation plantation. So enough of that, right? Inshallah, you learn the language because it's the language of the will of God. She's a lawyer. There you go. So tell if your great grandpappy, who you knew was mega rich, he left a will, but he left it in Arabic. Will you learn how to read Arabic now? Well, Allah has put His will in the Quran in Arabic. Do you want to know His will? Well, then learn how to speak the language that He revealed His will in. And if you don't deserve it. I'm not trying to be mean to the person. I'm talking like she needs a spanking or something. No. So take the heat off of that if there's any of it, okay? All right, let's go on. So the Al-Ash'ari view has endured to this day. And its most extreme form, so the point is, once the person starts with a certain idea, once it gets extended, stretched, elaborated on, etc., compounded, then it will reach an end that was inherent in its beginning. And this is what is inherent in the anti-rationalist, anti-philosophical, anti-scientific Ash'ari view is this, as an example. Muhammad Yusuf, the late leader of the group called the Nigerian Taliban, explained why Western education is a sin. By explaining its view, this is this person's representation of the Ash'ari view, because again, this is part of the problem 1,000 years later, that people lost the handle, lost the touch, lost the trajectory, lost the original intent and orientation of the, like we talk about the Constitution, right? They talk about the original framers, right? So you have the original Ash'ari folks, but then you have the people who are now in the 21st century. They say, well, yeah, I'm Ash'ari, right? And we say education is a sin. Western education is a sin. And so we're against philosophy, we're against science, we're against rationality, we're against thinking and reasoning. Allah's in charge of everything. And only what Allah says is what goes, whatever. So you come to views like this, absent that rationality that says Western education is a sin, and they give as an example, for example, the rain. Now this is this Taliban talking. The rain, say, we believe, speaking of the rain, we believe it is a creation of God rather than an evaporation caused by the sun that condenses and becomes rain. So it's like took the whole water cycle out the conversation. It's just God's creation. God created, it rains, that's that. Auzubillah. This Ash'ari view is also evident when Islamic leaders attribute natural disasters to God's vengeance, as they did when they said that the 2010 eruption, so this is as late as 2010, that the eruption of Iceland's volcano was the result of God's anger at immodestly dressed women in Europe. That's why that volcano, look at how they dress. That's why that volcano, no scientific, nothing. It's just God's punishment. Such references sound crazy to Western ears, but given their frequency in the Muslim world, they must sound at least less crazy to Muslims. Then there's Robert R. Riley, and our friend Imam Enrique, and he had sent me a text. Whatever, what's that phone chat thing? What it was called? Snapchat. No, it's not Snapchat. WhatsApp. Yeah, WhatsApp. He said he sent me a picture of the cover of the book, and the cover of the book was The Closing of the Muslim Mind. And he asked me, have you seen this book? I told him, no, I hadn't seen it. There are two critical books. One is of the same name, right? Well, similar name, and it's by Bloom. I believe the author's name is Bloom, and it's called The Closing of the American Mind. Very, very important book. Any of you readers there is like, get some sense of the closing of the American Mind. Well, this one is The Closing of the Muslim Mind by Robert R. Riley. He said, it's quoted from this book, the fatal disconnect between the creator and the mind of his creature is the source of Sunni Islam's most profound woes. Your mind has got disconnected from the creator and his creation. And we had 13 series, 13 Jum'ah on the intellect, the form, place within the system, how it grows, and its role in the guidance of Allah. Now here you have a system of identified as an Islamic system, a school of thought that disconnects the mind from the creator and from the creation. You got to see that that's a devilish thing. But again, I want to say as I go on that it's not those that are identified as the original champions of the Al-Ash'ari idea that are the ones that's doing this. It's those that have not grasped and got the line with the balance it should have, but taking it to its absurd extremes. Excuse me. Now, here comes something. The greatest and most influential voice of the Ash'arites was the medieval theologian Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, also known as Al-Ghazal, who died in early 12th century, 1111. In his book, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, Al-Ghazali vigorously attacked philosophy and philosophers. Now, I'm reading from this author of why the Arabic, whatever it was, turned away from the sciences. Okay. So he's saying Al-Ghazali vigorously attacked philosophy and philosophers, both the Greek philosophers themselves and their followers in the Muslim world, such as Al-Farabi and Avicenna, which is Ibn Sina, etc. So these are those who have made great contributions. Of course, it depends, of course, who you speak with, but their names remain in history because of their impact. But Imam al-Ghazali, they were prime targets for him. Now, why? Al-Ghazali was worried that when people become favorably influenced by philosophical arguments, they will also come to trust the philosophers on matters of religion, thus making Muslims less pious. So he's saying this was Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, that this was his fear. He said, I better get on this, I better punch this out, or these Muslims who won't know how to manage these ideas will be distracted from the path to piety. So let me go to work on this, right? Continuing, the article says, reason because it teaches us, now this is his attack, according to this representation of it, reason has to be under attack because it teaches us to discover, question, and innovate. That's what made it the enemy. Are you hearing what I'm saying? We got to attack reason because it teaches us to discover, question, and innovate. So those things now are the enemy. In the Ash'ari view, and so it has this intellectually crippling orientation because that's the way that the mind operates. So if I'm attacking the very tool that's supposed to do these things, what can I do but amputate the progress of the civilization that embraces it? Going on, it says, Al-Ghazali argued that in assuming necessity in nature, philosophy was incompatible with Islamic teaching, which recognizes that nature is entirely subject to God's will. So this is the antagonism was put up against thinking that things have causes. So that's when the issue of necessity, the language here says assuming necessity in nature is to say that everything has a cause. And that's basically cause and effect is how science operates, right? So he said, no cause, everything is by God's will. Nothing in nature, he wrote, this is the author citing Al-Ghazali, nothing in nature can act spontaneously and apart from God. So everything on the will. Let me go ahead and say this too. That view is a right brain view. It's the holism, the right brain. I think my right is still on this side. It's the holism. That's the right brain is always looking for the whole. The left brain is always looking for the parts. And what makes the whole, what is it comprised of, right? So the idea of Tawheed and the idea of the oneness of Allah and the idea of everything is under Allah's rule, etc., all right brain, good, original stuff. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's not him saying, because he gave us a right brain and a left brain. Of course, we know that now, a right lobe, right and left lobe. But the point is that in terms of this needing to understand, it's kind of commonsensical thing that there's a whole, and then the whole has parts. In order to understand the whole, then you need to also understand the parts. But see, that was a part of the whole debate, because there are those that want to hold to Tawheed and Allah's oneness and Allah's infinity and etc. And so to even think about God in ways other than his quote unquote wholeness is sacrilegious to these folks. Let's continue to read this. He said, while Al-Ghazali did defend logic, he did so only to the extent that it could be used to ask theological questions and wielded as a tool to undermine philosophy. So the best use of logic is against philosophy. Sunnis embrace Al-Ghazali as the winner of the debate the debate with the Hellenistic rationalists, meaning the Mu'tazila. Al-Ghazali knocked y'all out, okay? And opposition to philosophy gradually ossified, so it became hard like bone and stone. Even to the extent that independent inquiry, here's the sin now in that world that's structured that way. This is your crime. Independent inquiry became a tainted enterprise, and sometimes to the point of criminality. That if you inquire into certain things, you are a criminal. Arab contributions to science became increasingly sporadic as this anti-rationalism sank in. I want you to see, where did the decline come in? It came in when anti-rationalism is. I mean, I got to bring it up because it's so blatant. All you got to do is look now at the alphabet community, and I shouldn't have to say much more than that. You know, what is a woman? What is a man? Full-blown, grown man on the women's swim team. And it don't stop there. Using the locker room and the shower of the women. And he ain't had no kind of operation. And ain't nobody arresting him because he ain't a him, he's a her. That's you and me talking. But I'm saying, out there, if you in somebody's institution and you don't respect that they say of themselves, you in trouble. You understand what I'm saying? So that's a long way from what I Love Lucy won't even sleep in the same bed with Ricky. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's a long way, man. But it has become normal. Okay, well, put the same rationalist position on. There's a time when being rational was good. Now we are anti-rational. Don't think, just follow and believe, and don't inquire, don't reason. If you do that, it's un-Islamic. So the Jews go away with the Nobel Prizes, and the Christians go away with the Nobel Prizes, and the Muslims are at the mercy, if there is any, of them. And the Muslim got all the doggone oil up under the ground. Moving on. As the Middle Ages progressed, Arabic civilization began to run out of steam. This is another publication say run out of steam. It saw very few innovations, and now you know why, in the fields that it had previously dominated, such as optics and medicine. It says now this is all after this movement here from the 10th, 12th, 13th centuries. Now the author says, in the 19th century, there was a modest rebirth of science in the Arabic world, but it was soon followed by decline. The civilization had been closed, resentful, violent, and hostile to discourse and innovation. So now remember, with the professor Pagels, he's saying 5% innovation, 95% imitation. So what about people that we don't want to imitate you because you're the West, so we're not going to imitate you. But then we're also not going to innovate because innovation is bid'ah, wrong reading, but that's what it is. So where does the Muslim world sit in the context of the modern world as it exists right now? I just tell you, go over in the corner and make dhikr and Allah will take care of you. Just remember Allah, subhanallah, 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 subhanallah. Hold Allah high in your heart. And that's going to do, man, you got to know that's worse than they did us as Trinitarian Christians. Just wait until you die and God going to give you yours by and by. La dunya, you don't want none of this world. Y'all would rather have blah, blah, blah. You know, one square meter in Jannah than acres and acres on the earth. Subhanallah. You know that's going on. And so many of us newbies, we just right in the conga line. Shouldn't do it. The civilization had become closed, resentful, violent, and hostile to discourse and innovation. The first 4 centuries of Islam was what saw vigorous discussion and flexibility regarding legal issues. But by the end of the 11th century, back to that 1,000 years, by the end of the 11th century, the gates of ijtihad were closed for Sunni Muslims. There's difference of opinion on that, but enough of it to incorporate. The gates of ijtihad were closed for Sunni Muslims, and new readings of Islamic revelation became a crime. So now you should understand why Imam Mohammed rahimahullah and students of his who have this tendency to interpret, have this tendency to think and reason about the revelation and what this means and what that means and what's that saying and what that's pointing to. Bid'ah, bid'ah, bid'ah. So we don't take from W.D. Muhammad. We don't take from his students, blah, blah, blah. You know, it is what it is. You know, there's another thing I didn't make a note of it here, but I'll go ahead and tell you that I believe the scientist's name was Ramanujan. I may not have that right, but whatever. There was a question asked about who really made great contributions to mathematics and science, really made a different, game changers, innovators, la la la. And so this is like what is it? A Quora. Some of you know about Quora, where you ask a question, you put it out there, and get different people to give responses to it, right? So different people were naming different people who, I think this person was innovative, and that person was a game changer in this math, and this one invented that, this one invented. And then the person who posed the question said, in response, in essence, he's saying, what you're saying about this person over here, it's true, they did, but they didn't really innovate that. They actually learned that from that, and the only thing that they extended it upon was this. So it wasn't as game changing as this or that. So after a couple of answers, then this person responds and says, no, the real game changer was, I'm saying Ramanujan, might not be the proper name, but was him. That is, he was more he was more genius than all of them. But most people so it couldn't be Ramanujan because everybody really knows about Ramanujan. He spoke of someone else, who was of that caliber, but not well known at all in the field, in the domain, as the one who propounded really innovative and really high level mathematics. And he said that the reason that he was not as prominent and as effective as he could have been was that he didn't have the wherewithal, the courage to be alone. So I have to do better about that next time I talk about it. But the point is that the people who got the big names and that, they were crowd pleasers. They were crowd followers. And so they got to be well known. They were good. They got to be well known. But there was one that was better than them, but he never got to that status because he was afraid of being alone. So he went along with the crowd in a certain way too. And that's the point that I'm actually trying to make, is that this is what happens when real, quote unquote, innovation, and I'm using it in the best and most healthy way, when innovative ideas, they are not ideas that are necessarily embraced by the mainstream, by the crowd, by the larger bodies of people. People are real comfortable with being in those circles because there's a lot of people here. So therefore, people are more comfortable there. So less questioning, less willing to challenge whatever is in the crowd. But that's also what keeps you down if your interest is to make a difference. Well, in order to make a difference, if you do have a difference-making position, but you're unwilling to stand alone on that difference-making position, then you ain't gonna make a difference. You just gonna be just like everybody else. Yeah. So this is a part of what Imam Mohammed brings to the table. Yeah, he brings to the table where it's like, yeah, it might not be a whole lot of people on that side of the fence in terms of that, but it's because people know it and reject it, or they don't know it and they compare it to what they think they already know, and they don't even know where they know came from. Very important. Very important. So now, did Imam al-Ghazali, did he actually condemn philosophy and science in the Muslim world? I'm going to start out by letting you know, no, he didn't. Like the author we just read, Imam al-Ghazali had his fears about it. I had an experience similar to that. I don't know if any of you, I know you remember the Secret, when that thing first came out, The Secret. When I first saw it, heard it, etc., I knew it was going to be a thing among a lot of people, including Muslims. And so, but some of you know, I always say you got to watch out for the fish bones, right? Because you can get something you think is all filet. It's like, no, there's a fish bone in there, and if you swallow that, you're gonna get choked on that fish bone. So I did a series on The Secret, right? Trying to pull the fish bone because it's truth mixed with other stuff, right? So I see in Imam al-Ghazali, at the time that he was, in his sense of responsibility for his people, if you will, it's like, look, I got to warn you all against this, because this is not what it seems. It might be shiny, and it might, be attractive, but it has some problems to it. So let's look at it. Iqbal, Allama Muhammad Iqbal, very important thinker in the history of Islam, rahimahullah alayhi. In his reconstruction of religious thought, he gives some defense to Al-Ghazali. He also has his criticism, but he said this. He said, the study of Greek philosophy obscured the Muslims' view of the Quran. So it's like, while the Muslims, we get touted for getting Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, getting that information, shining it up and sending it on to Europe and doing, again, innovative and other things like that in consequence of our contact with it and breathing life into the Dark Age Europe and bringing about the Renaissance, But we were also affected by it and not always in a good way, which is also a part of the fear that Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah had, right? And so Iqbal, he brings this out. He says the study of Greek philosophy obscured the Muslims' vision of the Quran. Criticism one from him, he says Socrates focused his attention on the world of man alone, meaning that he was totally, quote unquote, humanistic, if you will. It's all about man. Plato, he despised sense perception, which in his view yielded mere opinion, but no real knowledge. So then he goes on, when Muslims began to read the Quran in the light of Greek thought, listen to this, it took them over 200 years to perceive, though not quite clearly, that the spirit of the Quran was anti-classical. So classical being defined by Socrates, Plato, that's classical, right? That's what talked about Hellenization earlier. So that's what Imam al-Ghazali was seeing. He said, man, y'all get wrapped up in this, you're going to be blind and deaf and dumb or what have you. And so Iqbal, much later, Iqbal was still living within the 20th century. So him, 900 or more years from al-Ghazali, recognizing here that Muslims were set back 200 years by getting into the Greek philosophy without that benefit, right? And what I'm saying to us right now in the 21st century, you get connected the wrong way to Al-Islam in modern time, you're looking at minimally 200 years of backwardness. That's what's at stake. If you don't embrace the religion right and plant your feet and your life in this soil with a stability that is sustainable in the best civilizational way, I don't know, we'll just be nomads looking for somebody to take care of us, our generations. God, that's unacceptable. But you have to get your thinking straight in the religion so that you can practice the religion in a way. Just think about it like this. You know, you got hunter-gatherers, then you got the agricultural period, right? If you don't have what I'm talking about, we don't have what I'm talking about established, then we're still just hunter-gatherers. We're not planting our own food. We have to chase our food wherever it is. When it's plentiful, we're all right. When it's not plentiful, then we just starve to death. We have to become at least agrarian, metaphorically speaking, by establishing a food source in Al-Islam. You understand what I'm saying when I say food source? A way to sustain ourselves vis-a-vis Al-Islam and be established with Al-Islam on all levels so that our civilization can flower, flourish, blossom. Isti'mal. Look that up in the Quran. That's what God said. I've given you everything necessary to establish your life. And that's what we have to do. And it means to make something, a place, humanly habitable. You have to create a space where human beings can live and grow as human beings. Okay. So the position on another author is different author. Well, his name is Shuaib Ahmed Malik, doctor. So he's the one that asked the question: did Al Ghazali condemn philosophy and science in the Muslim world? So he's critiquing that claim. He's saying Al Ghazali, he criticized the Muslim philosophers, not philosophy. In the incoherence of the philosophers, he disagreed on 20 points, 17 of which take one outside of mainstream. So his critique of it was because, look, you follow this idea, you're going to be outside of the mainstream. So that, therefore, is a problem, right? And that's what his publication does. And then the other three were those that would take you outside of Islam. So he's trying to, build a fence, give some guidance, and give a warning. Say, look, you follow these ideas, it's going to take you here. You follow those ideas, it's going to take you out of Islam. That's what leaders are supposed to do, right? So he developed his own philosophical and theological system in a later work called Moderation in Belief, Iqtisad fil al-I'tiqad. Okay. I think I said that. Okay. I may not have to go through all this reading. Let me ask you, who wants to give me and free the group and tell me what's the thrust of the Al-Ashari school of thought? What's there? Any one or two words that says you understand that Al-Ashari? One more time.
Backwards.
Backwards in which way?
Backwards in the fact that they just employ one way of thinking about education.
Okay, what is it? What, you're on the right track. But I want you to give me words to finalize this. So what are they against? What are they against?
They're against incorporating new ideas or an expansive way about thinking about it.
Okay, good. So you've done well. Anti-rationalist, anti-philosophical, anti-science. So those are the anti. So you took, it's a simplification, but anti-rationalist. So don't use your mind, your logic, your reasoning, questioning, etc. Take things as they are revealed, and etc. Don't try to break things up and the like. Okay, so the opposite. Somebody else want to give me Al-Ashari? We got the Al-Ashari. So Mu'tazila is what? It's rational. Yes. So it's more on the side of all those things that we talked about. Now, thank you. So I won't go through all of this. I'll only mention the name. The Mu'tazila school of thought is attributed to Wasil ibn Ata, and he is dated 700 to 749 CE. And the Ashari school of theology was founded by Abu al-Hasan al-Ashari, 874 to 936 in the Common Era. So let's move past that. So you know where it comes from. You know the gist of it, of each. And a part of what made it, again, what it was, is that everybody was just fully hardline on all of their position. There was no room for movement, discussion, flexibility, or anything like that. That was it, etc. So enough said in that. I'll just read one line from this next page. It said, "This is due in part to the fact that Ash'ariism was adopted as the official doctrine of the Abbasid Caliphate in 10th century." So we're back to that 1,000 years. I want you to be real clear. This debate, discussion, etc., is a continuation of something that started 1,000 years ago, and and also because many Sunni scholars have been influenced by the works of Ash'ari theologians. Okay, nonetheless, the Mu'tazila ideas continue to be studied and debated by scholars within and outside the Sunni Muslim world. Now, moving toward an end, in his book, The Ethics of Disagreement in Islam by Taha Jabbar al-Alwani, it is said, the author explains the crisis of juristic reasoning. So here's trying to make that work in society ran into all kinds of problems. So he's talking about that, the crisis of juristic reasoning that occurred during Islamic history. He describes how the chaotic and unreliable state of ijtihad led to the corruption of legal verdicts as judges twisted the text of original sources to suit their own purposes. In response to this crisis, many Muslims turned to taqlid, that is blind imitation, as a solution. They began to follow one of the four a'imma, that is, you have to get in one of these four schools of thought, and put their trust in their rulings. This reliance on the four schools of thought caused negligence in the study of Quran and Sunnah. Who has to study Quran and Sunnah when all you got to do is just ask him? And that's it. And then people turned away from independent reasoning. As a result, listen to what happened. Intellectual thought stagnated, ignorance became common, and harmful innovation and corruption flourished. This is what happens when that way of being gets pushed aside. So you're left with a totally unthinking, incompetent society that blindly follows whoever's given the authority to tell you what is. And you don't have the wherewithal to assess their thinking because you haven't been taught to think. And there's Arkoon, I believe is his name. But he said what the Muslim world suffers from is from the unthought and the unthinkable. There are things that we haven't given any thought to, and there are things that we have found unthinkable. So it's like handicapped brains is an issue. So, brothers and sisters, in my humble opinion, what's best for new Muslims in modern times is Imam Mohammed's methodology and approach to al-Islam, because it provides a valid, authentic perspective in al-Islam that is independent of the misunderstanding that accompanies the canonized orthodoxies whose origins most new Muslims don't understand. Particularly as regards living al-Islam with the proper balance between rationality and spirituality, Imam Muhammad's balanced approach is the best for this day and time. Here's a statement from him. He says, religion was before science as we know science. Because remember, these two positions at Ash'ari and Mu'tazili, they were opposing each other, but that was basically like splitting the person. Right-brained, left-brained, that's our modern contemporary talk that we're putting on it. It's like, one says think, the other says whatever, just take the whole, right? The religion was before science as we know science. Religion was before philosophy as we know philosophy. Religion was first, later came philosophy and science. If we could understand the history of the world, philosophy and science sprang from religion. So that should tell you that once there was a scientific orientation in religion. So this is the split. So the idea, religion in its originality, people like Descartes and others who are known with regard to their thinking, these people were theologians also. So the point is that the disconnect between science and religion that was falsely fostered in this split between the Ash'ari and the Mu'tazili, as I see it, this, and they have this thing now in the world, it's called NOMA, non-overlapping magisteria, where there's some kind of contract, philosophical, intellectual agreement between the theological class of people say, okay, I stay on my side of the fence, you stay on your side of the fence. If you're going to be a legitimate scientist, then don't talk about religion. If you're going to be a legitimate theologian, then don't talk about science. Keep all these things separate. That's agreement, an agreement that happened. Stephen Jay Gould is one of the fathers of that. So the point is that it was always, all of the sciences are inherent part of the religion al-Islam. And Imam is speaking to that here, and I'll finish his quote. He says, if we understand the history of the world, philosophy and science sprang from religion. So that should tell you that once there was a scientific orientation in religion. If it was not, then how did science branch off from it? That should also tell you that once there was a philosophical school in religion, it was just a part of the religion, and these things branched off from the religion. And now we have religion, we have philosophy, we have science, and we don't know that they all began in one, and that was in religion. So, brothers and sisters, we go back finally looking at these reports. We talked about the hadith where the woman was spending so much time, doing her prayers, seeking to entreat God for this and that, and the prophet was pointing out to her that's extreme. All you need to do is remember Allah, say these 4 things as he said. He talked about hallowed be Allah, that praise be to him, according to the number of his creation, according to the pleasure of his self, according to the weight of his throne, according to the ink that's used to record the words of his praise. The prophet says, say that 3 times. That's like spending your morning in praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do that and you're done. And the other, again, where it says, if anyone wants Allah to love them, Allah's messenger to love them, then speak the truth. If you say anything, fulfill your trust. If you're put in a position of trust, and be a good neighbor. And like the prophet, he says, I fast, I sleep, I marry women. That's my sunnah. And so anyone who follows that is with me. Anyone who turns away from my sunnah is not from me. So we're saying avoid extremes. Avoid extremes. Even though sometimes people can give you a spiritual idea or a spiritual feeling, a sense that, oh, this is the high stuff. Well, you got to watch out. It may be an intoxicant. And there are a lot of things. Intoxicants can make you feel good. But in the end, if it's not really grounded in what Allah has ordered and the way that Allah has ordered it, then they're just triggering your dopamine and you're getting physiological, viscerally attached to something, but you still don't have the mind of it. So be careful. Allah knows best. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Any comments or questions before we actually shut down?
Yes.
One more time. Yeah, if there's a mic, you can pass it around. Let me look at some of what's. You know Latif Sabor?
Yeah.
He hollering at you online right here.
I saw.
Oh, you saw him? Okay. Yeah. Latif, all right, we recognize you, bro. Assalamu alaikum. Like, if we went by text, he's the only one online, right? So, but no, we're honored with the presence of many online. Okay, who's got the mic? Well, is it on? There's a little switch on the top by the wires. Walaikum assalam. Did you change the batteries? No. Walaikum assalam.
So, in the Quran, it says, in the Quran, it says, think for man surely progresses to the power of the fall.
Yes.
Okay, so it's very obvious. There's not a lot of thinking going on. People are not thinking, just like what you're saying. I mean, as you were speaking on it, I'm reflecting on what I see, especially where I work.
Yeah.
Because there are, yeah,
Yeah, it's going in and out. It's okay. Yeah.
So, there are a lot of Muslims where I'm working, and they come from different, different walks, different places. And I transferred all my jobs to a different area because I wanted to be able to pray and have a meditation room.
Mm-hmm.
And I was made aware of it, and so I was able to transfer so that I can get my prayers in.
Okay.
Now, the people that use this prayer room are mostly guys, So it's very small. I have about 5 to 10 in there. And I'm meeting all kinds of different, Muslims. And I have to say brothers because I'm seeing sisters coming out. I'm coming out, but I don't see you, for prayer. So what happens is that I have to wait for them to come out because 5 of them can get in.
Yeah.
And then I go. And so I played one of the brothers who told me about the room. He's very, very nice and what have you. And so when I started going, I was waiting for them to come out. But here's the thing: there are brothers that, they can keep going in. One comes out, another one go in. So I'll just.
So you'll never get in, huh?
That could happen.
Yeah.
Right. And it has at a couple of times, a few times. But then there was a brother like, "Sister, you're waiting for prayer." I'm like, "Yes, I am." And he says, "I'm going to get them out." I'm like, "Hopefully, God, thank you." And so then, he's telling brothers, we got to pray, let her go pray, and then you guys can go back. So whenever I see that brother or another brother, I'm able to get in. There was a time when I was in there in prayer, and a brother came in, little young brother, and he had did his prayer. I was like right there, I was like, this is my prayer. And I'm like, you fully see, sister here, and he just went on and did his prayer. So when I saw the brother that was very helpful, I told him, just talk, let the brother know that it's not soon, it's that, it's not that, we're going to come in there with me. Raise the little room, it's just me and him.
Yeah.
And so then I said, the brother said, well, were you there for us? I guess, of course,
Yeah.
And so then he spoke with him. But listen, this is what I'm finding out.
Okay.
This is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing things like people are not reading the Quran. That is the problem. They're not reading, they're not asking a lot to help them understand. They're not digging into it because when we have a brother knows, like we're not going to do that should know someone wants to get in. I knock, if a person knocks and doesn't come in, you're going to know it's the system. So now if you're there, you want to get your sunnahs in, you want to get all your Christians, the month of Ramadan, but you got to be waiting. Okay.
Yeah.
So now a lot of listeners looking at it. So now you think you're going to get just blessed because you're doing all these prayers, but you have people waiting. We only have like a break, 15 minutes. Everybody has a break. So it's a blessing to be able to do prayer. Now when I go in, I really think it's important for them to pray. I really think it's very important for them to get it in. But anyway, when I go in, I don't try to do extra sooner, because I know we're on a little break. So I'll come out so that they can get in. But I mean, just the thought of like, how are you thinking? How are you thinking that you want to take all this time when you have somebody waiting to get in? But what prompted me to want to share this is, you're talking about the blind follower. There was a person from a certain masjid. It's not so much from a certain masjid, but it lives close to a certain masjid and goes there. And so I see some of the people from that masjid here at the iftar. So I just said to him, I didn't see you when it comes to the iftar. It's like, oh, we have one. And I was like, oh, no, they're over here or something, right? And he's like, oh, and so, and then they said, yeah, only you did last year more than maybe one time, you know. I was like, oh, really? Yeah. And then he goes, yeah, you know, the Imam over there, they say he does a coupon where, you know, his school is 2 hours. You know, that's not good. I said, well, it's like 2 hours, it's a little, you know, and then he goes, well, he goes, that's not good. He said, but don't get me wrong, I hear that it is very, it's really wisdom. Now I'm looking at him like, huh? What are you saying? I mean, if something is packed with wisdom you get from nowhere else, which don't go because you think it's 2 hours, for one, you haven't even checked it out. I heard, is what you said.
Yeah.
I heard.
Yeah.
You know, so you're not even thinking. Then the brother goes on to tell me about, you know, his shake is in no value.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not going to say, well, my shake is a lot. You know, I mean, for real. You know, but I'm listening, you know, and, you know, okay, so this brother, yeah, I'm being incarcerated, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't stand for everybody who's been incarcerated coming out thinking like that. So that's not why I'm saying it that way. But I'm just saying that the blind following, I mean, thinking, not one iota, not one bit, and in the same breath, you're telling me that you're being invited, you know, the co-workers having a party, and I'm being invited, you know, and I'm going to the party. And so much as the co-worker invited everybody to the party, including me.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying? But here's the deal. Okay, we're going to talk about what's sooner, what's not. You're not even thinking. Why are you going partying during Ramadan? You know what I'm saying? There's no thinking going on, you know, and it's true what you're saying. You know, it's true, it's like a disease. I mean, there's no thinking, you're just talking, you know, and then when one of the brothers came out the prayer room and he said it was a sister, you know, and then, you know, like, you know, sometimes people take things just a little too far.
Yeah.
You have to balance yourself. It's not like you can't look at me. Because if you know, like, you don't look at me and just, you know, wow, it's on and crack it. You know what I'm saying? It ain't even like that. You just make it all over the place. You know, and it's like, really?
Okay.
You know, like, really? But then when I was in the prayer room, I could hear them talking and beating it up, and I could see that this brother, and this was different, you know, a brother wasn't like African American or like that. But this brother was feeling good, that made him feel good to be able to talk to somebody. You know, we got this problem too, just about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really supporting each other. You know, we want to be known for by other Muslims other than our own, you know, our own kind.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so now we're about something because they accept us, and I've seen that, you know. And I was like, oh, this is so sad. But you know, I don't want to say anything really, really bad about the brother because I see it's just his ignorance, you know, because on the other hand, he's kind of humble and has been helpful. It's just that the mind is just gone.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Shahid. We're gonna go male, female, male, female. You Alaikum assalam.
So I don't want to sound crazy, but I'm right under the hand when I walk in the home.
You did what? You did what? I didn't hear you.
What did you say? Oh, I said, in accord with a lot of things you said.
Yeah.
The Imam taught us to think out the box.
Uh-huh.
And I remember, because I was there as a witness to everything. So he encouraged us to keep our culture going, things that his father taught us that was good, we're going to keep that going.
Mm-hmm.
And to think outside the box.
Uh-huh.
How your spirit leads you.
And let
So
people see you.
when I read Quran,
Mm-hmm.
and I read in the Quran where it says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish the disbelievers by burning them to the point where he have to change their skins
Uh-huh.
and replace it with a new skin and start the process all over again and keep burning them burn that skin up, put in a new skin, burn it, and keep repeating that process to the day of Yom Kippur, where they will reach the final decision whether they go to hell or not. So when I look at creation, the human being is nothing but energy in a human form. All creatures are nothing but energy in a human form.
Not all creatures, not all human beings. I get you. You said all creatures,
saying,
not in human form.
I'm just saying my thing. If it's moving, it's energy.
Yeah.
In that form. So, in accord with the way I interpret that in the Quran is that when you die, the human body takes 100 years to decompose. When I read the book of death, it said that in the grave, you can feel all of that decomposition happening. Worms coming out of your body, eating you up. All of you go through the whole process. Pain unimaginable. So then, Allah can take that, it's nothing. Allah can take that energy that was yours and put it to any form that you want. You could be a rat, a snake, a lion. Because I look at it, when I look at these wild animal shows about the jungle and all that, and all they do is fight, eat each other up. They get up in the morning, go and look to eat up another animal. And I see people like that in this world. I see people like rats. I see people like that have the character of a snake.
Yeah.
I see people that have the character of different type of animals. So when I look at these animals, I wonder who they used to be. I don't want to sound crazy, but to me,
too late.
It makes sense. Well, I know people just like lions and bears and tigers. All they do is fight and eat up somebody, steal something, tear up something.
Okay.
I said, wow, you need to sound real bad, brother. But that's how I think.
Alhamdulillah. All right.
That's all. I won't say no more.
Alhamdulillah. All right, so we're going to get back to the sister in the back. Zakia. Give it to Zakia. Oh, that's good. So. All right. I don't know about it.
Anyway.
Okay. I wanted to kind of piggyback off. All right, well, yeah. Right off.
Turkey back, okay. Camelback.
In terms of thinking and people who are Muslims specifically not thinking. Tell me again, what's the name of that group?
Al-Ashari.
Yeah, say it again.
Ash'ari.
Spell
ASH apostrophe ARI.
Ashar. Ashar.
Ash'ari.
Ashar. That type of thought, or that type of, those type of people, that type of mentality. I was listening to, this is perpetuated, that's what I was going to say. It's perpetuated amongst the leadership. So when she said, okay, people are not thinking, but the leaders that they're following are not teaching them or encouraging them.
Right.
As our leader, has taught us that. I was 18 years old, and I can remember it was independent thought that got me out of the Rush. Allah blessing me with independent thought that got me to go to a message that had me searching for God. And then it's been independent thought and Allah's mercy on me and independent thought, right? To continue this path, because what I've deducted is that independently, I'm going to be standing alone in front of my Lord one day, answering, right? So then I said, okay. So to speak to the leaders not talking or teaching on that line, they're not teaching that people thing. Because this particular leader, and we love him, he's a person that we all know, I'm not going to mention his name, but we listen to him, he's been here before and everything. But I heard him the other night, I've been listening to a lot of stuff. I heard him last night say about repeat a hadith that says, and a lot of you all people may agree with this or not. I choose not to agree with it because I don't have the experience myself. But he was saying, you know, that it's the hadith that says that the Sahabas put rocks in their mouths so that they, when they go into the restroom, they would not mention the name of Allah. Okay? So whether or not that's a good hadith or a weak hadith, but me being a person who has a handicap, just because I make a lot of transfers. That means I move from one spot to the next, and sometimes I don't make it. Like I can fall in the bathroom. So who are we talking?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I say. I mean, he's okay. What just one of the first tests that you put whatever to is just a straight common sense test. It's like, how is putting a rock in my mouth? And why is it necessary to put a rock in my mouth to stop myself from talking? I'm just saying, what? It's like, it just don't make no sense. So I don't know. We're gonna have to cap the time off. Go ahead, finish your point. Okay, yeah. I mean, the bottom line is just, you know, the first test you put it to is just the common sense test. It's like, you know, the purpose is what's reasonable about this way of achieving that purpose. I don't get it. I thought you was going to say something like they put rocks in their mouth because they whatever, so they won't. I don't know. I can't make no sense of that either. Oh yeah, see that's the situation that common sense tell you. Yeah. Go ahead. What's up?
When you were describing the differences or the development of the Islamic mind, it reminded me of the mind that is operating in America related to the laws and the practice of the laws, the Supreme Court, and you know, the conservatives and how they've gotten their people not to think, but to only rely on their leaders to guide them and you know, only watch Fox News and only listen, and no matter what other logic comes out of it, or what reason and logic and norms, they're not going to buy any of that.
No.
They're only going to buy what their leaders say. And
right.
I think that's a good example of what we're seeing today. In the political world.
Absolutely. And there's a statement that's attributed to Voltaire, I believe it is, another, you know, European philosopher, whatever. He said those who can get you to believe in absurdities can get you to commit atrocities. The more crazy that they are able to get you to think, the more crazy stuff they're able to get you to do. That's why this whole fake news, it's like they're stripping away from everybody. You don't have nothing to trust. You don't trust anybody. You don't trust anything, except for that one that has that appropriate eloquence for you. So it's like, we might not think Trump is eloquent, right? But he's eloquent to somebody. It's like he speaks for me, whoever that is, and he can get them to believe anything. And he literally said it. It's like, I think he said I could shoot somebody on, what he said? I can kill somebody and what? He won't go to jail. He won't get convicted or whatever, right? It's just crazy. But that's the idea. The idea. Look at, when you get a chance, look at that video. That there's a YouTube video. It's called Mass Psychosis. It's that cartoon handwriting. So you'll know that it's the one that I'm talking about. If you see, it's the cartoon following the words, right? Mass psychosis. That's what we're heading for. It's really insane. Go, anybody. Oh, was there a sister in the back? Go ahead. Go ahead. Why? Bring my son.
I just want to make a comment regarding new Muslims and not so new Muslims.
Yeah.
Have a dilemma, presented with the dilemma. Some of us weren't presented with it, but with the dilemma that there are schools of thought, and you should fit into one of those. It's the most proper for you to fit into one of those. Now, who closed the door to Ijtihad? I don't know. Who had the authority to close the door?
Yeah.
It was put out there like, you got to be in one of these. And then I've heard in our community those who consider Imam Mohammed as our leader, the idea, and probably maybe from him I may have heard, that the world of language that he has presented us with really constitutes a school of thought.
Yeah.
But we don't want to be alone. So we don't want to promote that, because in that, it's like, okay, you don't come with that. So, but I mean, it's true. But one thing that I heard him say way back, maybe 1975, 76, something like that, he said, I'm not trying to give you my mind. I'm trying to give you the mind.
Yeah.
And then you can go from there. That's what it's all about. It's like, well, that's it. That's all.
Yeah. No, it's something extremely just special that's going on. That's right. It's like you have to have the experience in order to really understand what's happening. So madhab, which is named for a school of thought, is actually another way of just saying method. So he has a method, a way of thinking. I could cite 5 or 6 little axioms from the Imam's method that constitute how we think about society, creation, scripture, just those principles. That's the madhab. You think, when you see this kind of thing, you think this way, and everything else follows. Go ahead,
You know, I picked up a book the other day, and it was about basically what I was talking about, where it says, that we have to read one of these schools of thought, or you look upon as being rather high.
Yeah.
And so, I look at this thing that, Allah says in the Quran that He brought us forth from the wombs of our mothers, and He gave us Asura, Asama, and Afidah, sight, hearing, and intellect. If He gave us that, He gave it to us for a reason.
Yeah.
And so, we know that in the farewell speech, Prophet peace be upon him said he leave behind 2 things: the Quran and his example. He didn't say he left the scholars. Now, we know scholars, we respect them. They're human beings, they make mistakes. So I was in one of the institutions a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to some of the guys, and they thought they followed the Sunnah. And so I told them, I said, in one of the hadiths it had where the prophet allegedly used 3 stones to wipe himself. And when you stop and think about that, you can't clean those pieces up even though 3 stones.
Yeah.
And so The guy, he tells me, he says, you know, I follow Sunnah. So I asked him, I said, well, what do you use, 3 stones or toilet paper? He said, toilet paper. I said, well, you ain't following Sunnah then. Yeah, that's crazy.
All right. All right, Tasneem, down. All right, as long as you don't have no dead rats running around.
You know, when I is the mic on?
I don't know.
It goes in and out.
Well, like Adam and Eve, snakes don't talk.
Right.
If they were talking then, they'd be talking now. It was a man that came to Eve with the character of a snake.
Uh-huh.
And we said that when he got thrown out the kingdom, he was gonna come at them from the left, from the right, come at us from the front, the rear. He was gonna come at us in every kind of way.
Yeah.
So the way I interpret that, a man came to Eve.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't give her no apple, he gave her a drug.
Uh-huh.
Intoxicated her.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had Cain. Cain killed Abel. Now Cain was evil. Adam wasn't evil. Cain was evil. Who was his father? That's how I think like that. That's all.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah. Pass it right here.
That didn't happen.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You know, coming from, I would say the belly of the beast, and understanding math and break it down. And let me say this: it's only us that take the word math and turn it into math. That didn't come from nowhere else.
Right.
It came from us. As well as we always hear about Quran and Sunnah. And the hadith that Malik just shared was what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. They left us 2 things. But I heard you, Imam Fahim, as well as Imam Mohammed, rahimahullah. I've never heard no one outside of that of YouTube speak about Uswa Hassan. We don't never hear about that part.
Right.
We hear about everything else. But Uswatin Hassan, we don't hear about that.
Right.
That's what we need to be following. That's what we need to be adhering to. But the only way we can adhere to that is by being free thinkers. Yeah, it's a method. There's a method right here in America that was established decades ago.
Yeah.
Get aboard.
Alhamdulillah. All right, so we're gonna close it out. We have had a tradition of watching the message. I don't know, Khalid, did you bring the message today?
It's on the board out there, so.
Yeah, it's up on the screen out there.
Okay. So let's make Dua al-Fatiha in unison, and that's going to conclude our session together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Assalamu alaikum all of you online, and thank you for joining us. May Allah accept our prayers and our worship, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
You know, we always hear about everything else, but we